Ty, I don't know if the people know this, but almost 1/3 of players taken in the top 50 already missed multiple games or been placed on IR. So we need to make some moves in fantasy football, whether you're contending for a championship right now or just trying to make the playoffs. These are 8 guys you need to either be buying or selling on. And Ty, we're going to keep the format that we had last week. We're each going to give you a buy, then we're each going to give you a sell, and then we're going to talk about 4 players and whether you should buy, sell, or hold on them to hopefully give you a wide variety of guys for no matter where your team is at. But Ty, you're going to start us off with A.J. Brown, and you're going to get away from the let's buy workhorse running backs to buy maybe the scariest elite player in the entire NFL right now. So people need some convincing, and I may be people, so I'll let you go in on A.J. Brown.
Yeah, look, it took a little convincing for me because I've been sitting on everyone has been stewing over this Philadelphia pass catcher debate, right? Whether it's going to bounce back, whether we need to just avoid at all costs. And I think I've eventually found myself in the point where I'm just going to trust that Philadelphia is going to bounce back. That's ultimately what it comes down to. Now, I do want to throw the disclaimer out that AJ Brown may not be a buy for every single team out there right now. You may be sitting at 0-4, 1-3, or I guess now we're in week 6. So you're going to be 0-5, 1-4. And you're going to hear me say AJ Brown is a buy. And you're like, I can't buy AJ Brown right now. And I would agree with you. So this is for my teams out there that have the excess pieces that you can go trade away to bring in AJ Brown, let him stay on the bench until things get right and we get better games. And those are traditionally your championship contending teams. The reason that you should be looking at AJ Brown as a buy, if you are one of those teams, is because, like I said, we know how good it can be. Now, there's a lot to turn around here. Not going to deny it. We're bottom 12 in EPA per pass right now. We are in the bottom half of the league in success rate as an offense. Not great. And according to PFF, only 56% of AJ Brown's targets this year are catchable and 44% of them are accurate. And that's a major dip from last year because 71% of his targets were catchable and 58.5% were accurate. So I know it's not good right now and there's a lot to turn around. But here's where the opportunity comes in. Philadelphia has the 8th most difficult schedule remaining according to PFF. You get the Giants twice, you get the Vikings, you have a bye week in week 9. You get Green Bay, Detroit, Dallas, Chicago, a healthier Chargers team in week 14, Vegas, Washington twice, and Buffalo. 8 of those 10 opponents are in the top half of scoring on a per game basis. And I did that on a per game scale because we are now officially in bye week season. And 5 of the 10 teams are in the top half of fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position this year. So the combination of Philadelphia possibly throwing more, because again, you have opponents that can put up points, and defenses that give up fantasy points to the receiver position, at least creates the opportunity that AJ Brown can bounce back to somewhat of a normal kind of regularly scheduled programming for fantasy points then, and he could ultimately push you to winning your league. So the debate is still there if he can be a top 10 guy for the second half of the year. But I just see, again, the opportunity ahead with schedule and matchups that AJ Brown may not be the wide receiver 43 and may be closer to wide receiver 15, wide receiver 20.
Yeah, I see it for sure as well. 30% target share right now. He's top 10 in targets. He's top 12 in air yards currently. He has as many targets as Amon-Ra St. Brown and Justin Jefferson. So he's getting the ball thrown his way. It just hasn't converted, obviously. I think this Eagles team has a lot to figure out. I think if they want A.J. Brown on this team, they're going to have to figure it out with him. And so, yeah, he's a guy who is so talented that as long as they're going to continue to throw him the ball, I think we need to continue to trust him. And so I'm all for buying on A.J. Brown. I think at this point, his value's gotten cheap enough that people are just like, I can't even have him on my team anymore. Like, I'm going to do whatever, just get him off and move on.
I'll just say this too, as the kind of the cherry on top. Like you said, the targets have been there. AJ Brown is still a top 13 wide receiver in usage ever since the Dallas game. So over the last month, he has been getting the opportunities. And again, that's where the 56% of targets being catchable, 44% being accurate. That's where it hurts. But I'm just going to bank that we're going to bounce back in some way. And we're not expecting top 10. If we get it, awesome. But if he's closer to 15 and closer to 20 than he is to 40 and maybe even 50, that's a win of a deal for you.
For sure. And this is a Super Bowl caliber team. So we're going to bank on Hurts and him figuring it out and bouncing back. Before I get onto my buy, and then eventually we get onto the buy sell hold later on in the episode, we just want to invite you to join the fellowship. We're going to continue to invite you each and every week. We're 5,500 strong right now. We're making that next push, but we're going to continue to bring you guys content, and we just want you to be a part of it. We're dropping 3 episodes a week. We got short form content on other pages. So just asking you to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications as well. But Ty, I'll move on to my running back. Kind of took a page out of your book. Not quite the same caliber necessarily as Josh Jacobs or Bucky Irving or Devon Etienne. However, Travis Etienne's been pretty solid this season, and he is currently 4th in rushing yards. He's 10th in attempts on the season, 2nd in yards per carry. But the issue for Etienne is he's only got 2 rushing touchdowns, 3 total touchdowns. And a big reason for that is his inside the 5 carry percentage is 0% right now. And you might be going, oh, so they're giving it to Tootin and LaQuint Allen? No, they're not. It's just Trevor Lawrence running the ball in from inside the 5. And so for me, when I see that, obviously I think some of that's going to continue, but I don't think to the same extreme that we're seeing it right now, right? If you watch that game on Monday night, Trevor Lawrence took a really big hit inside the 5 on one of his goal line attempts. And I just don't think they want to subject him to that kind of punishment over and over again when you got a guy like Etienne who's averaging almost 6 yards per carry right now. But the big reason for his success this season is he's been good before contact and after contact. The Jags got him 1st in yards before contact, and he's currently still top 15 in yards after contact. I was looking at the Fantasy Pros rankings right now, and they have him 15th rest of the season. He's a guy, I think, to me, the reason we're lower and the reason we were lower coming into the year is because is he going to stay as the starter? That's the big question. And through the first 5 weeks, I've seen enough to go, he is a legit number 1 running back once again. The nagging injuries are gone, and the Jaguars are going to continue to trust him over either of these 2 rookies moving forward. So that's why I think Etienne is a buy, because I'm going in with, there might still be some questions for some people, but I think they've been answered, and I'm all in on Etienne rest of the season.
I would agree with you. It feels like Etienne is one of the very few names that have been producing at such a high level that you can still get at a relatively reasonable cost. Mm-hmm. And it's because people expect the floor to kind of fall out, that Bashaw Tootin is suddenly going to get involved, or that Trevor or Lawrence is going to continue the goal line carries that he's been getting and all that kind of stuff. So when you look at like the usage rate right now for Etienne, he's kind of a low end running back 2, and the production that you're seeing to be the running back 10 on the year and half PPR is because he's been getting some big explosive runs. Like he has runs of 30, 40, and even 70 yards. So like you said, there's an opportunity that just based on what we've seen through 5 weeks so far, that of Etienne being by far the best back in Jacksonville right now, that we're not expecting a major Bashaw Tootin emergence, and that there is an opportunity that we can find the goal, or that we can find the end zone with some goal line snaps if they don't want to get Trevor Lawrence. It put him in some dangerous positions. I'll just say it like that. And Etienne being 3rd in yards per carry out of all running backs with at least 15 carries just should be a sign of confidence that like Etienne is playing really good ball right now. And honestly, there's ways that his usage can change. There's ways where the box score can change, but he can still be a low end running back 1, high end running back 2 for you, despite the change in those numbers.
For sure. And I think the difference too, people are going to go, oh, well, Rashad White was the starter until the bye, so maybe that happens with Etienne. Rashad White was averaging sub 4 yards per carry. Etienne's almost pushing 6 right now. They're at a different level between the two of them, and I think that's what gives me the confidence. Is not just like, oh, we saw Liam Cohen do this last year. It's now Travis Etienne's playing really, really good football right now. So it's a little different than when you just got a bell cow as being inefficient that you're just using over and over.
Well, there was a tweet that I saw. It was from Eden Harditz. The Bucky Irving role belongs to Travis Etienne. The Rashad White role belongs to Travis Etienne. And the Sean Tucker role belongs to Bashal Tootin. And that is the like simplest way to explain it, is that if Bashal Tootin does kind of work his way into this offense, it's not going to be overtaking Etienne. If anything, it's going to be taking a little bit more of the Rashad White role. And I feel like that's another reason why people just don't really think of Etienne as like a reliable piece, is because they think, right, Liam Cohen, and we've got Bashal Tootin, who's the next Bucky Irving. That's just, we're so far into the year and there's been so much good play from Etienne that it just does not seem likely, like, at all at this point.
Definitely. And Ty, before we go to ourselves, I just want to remind the people, hey, if you're watching this right now and you're going, these guys are disagreeing, I want some disagreement. Back half of the show, buy, sell, hold. I promise we're going to have a little more disagreement, but
or just let us know in the comments
for sure. And the buys and sells we're talking about right now, like we agree pretty heavily on, so we're going to agree. But I got a feeling with some of the names coming up later in the show, we're going to have a little more disagreement, because Ty, I was putting Tony Pollard in the doc, and then I looked at the doc and saw that you already had Tony Pollard in there. So I am in full agreement that he is a sell. So I will let you tell the people why.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think it's going to be pretty hard to sell Tony Pollard or to try to like upgrade from him, just because he plays for the Tennessee Titans. And a lot of people are going to go like, oh, I'm not really that intrigued by Tony Pollard. So you may have to package Tony Pollard up to go find a true upgrade with him. But here's the why I'm willing to cut the ties with Tony Pollard right now. Tyjae Spears returned to action, and Tony Pollard's 89% snap rate through 4 games without Spears dropped to 73%. Now, I'm not expecting Tyjae Spears to overtake Tony Pollard at some point this year. The reason why I'm selling is because I'm expecting that drop in snaps to continue and end up closer to 60 to 65%. And then the cherry on top is the upcoming schedule that we have. The next 4 games: Vegas, New England, Indianapolis, and the Chargers. The Vegas matchup looks nice, looks good on paper, but I'm going to be honest, I think it could be fool's gold, as Vegas is 6th in defensive EPA per rush. And the only reason why they are leaking fantasy points to running backs is because they've given up the 2nd most rushing touchdowns to the position this year. So in a game against Tennessee, where it's going to be a little bit closer, I'm not going to be completely surprised if Vegas kind of bottles up Tennessee's run game a bit, because the game script will allow them to, if that makes sense. And then right after, like I said, New England, Indianapolis, and the Chargers are all bottom 6 in fantasy points allowed to the position. So I'm willing to cut the ties right now. I'm willing to use the Vegas matchup as kind of a selling chip or a selling piece right now to try to drive up some intrigue on Tony Pollard, because I think ultimately you're going to run into the wall of, like I said at the top, people are going to see a Tennessee Titans player in a trade package and go, I'm not really that intrigued. So you're going to need to get creative a little bit. And like I said, I think it's time to just cut the ties before it's too late.
Yeah, I think at this point, enough running backs have gotten hurt that you're probably just going to find some desperate enough. And we're not saying, oh, go sell Tony Pollard to buy Travis Etienne or AJ Brown. Maybe you can package them to get AJ Brown because they've both been so bad. But we're talking about buying like a wide receiver 4 for your team, just because it's going to get ugly for this Tennessee Titans offense and Tony Pollard, right? It's kind of it is a sell low off of one decent game, but we're both in agreement that it's not going to get better. If anything, it's going to get worse. And if we're wrong and we see him continue to repeat this volume, you're not going to be too upset that you lost that, right? Like, I think that's the 50-50 here is, does he continue to go 8 half PPR points, 10 half PPR, 7 half PPR points, or does it fall down to 4, 5, 6? And if it between those two, it's like, well, I just get him off my team and I don't have to worry about it. That's
Yeah.
really what it comes down to.
It's for sure. And really the only thing that has given him the better weeks, right, against Indy and Arizona was that he found the end zone.
Mhm.
And it's really just a simple question of like, how many times do I expect that to happen the rest of the year? So like you said, it's not necessarily a sell high, because I feel like a lot of people will have kind of realistic or reasonable expectations for a guy like Tony Pollard. But it is like, hey, if you can get creative and package and find a reasonable enough upgrade, like I would maybe target a guy like Chuba Hubbard. Maybe we're going, high. I don't want to call Tony Pollard a high floor, but like if you need a guy that is more of a high floor, like a Chuba Hubbard, I don't mind that at all. But again, you may have to get a little more creative than you normally would for a sell high or just a general sell.
Definitely. And then my sell real quick is Michael Pittman Jr. And I don't know. I'm conflicted on Pittman because I do think he's going to finish as a top 20 wide receiver rest of the year. But at the same time, I don't think it's going to be this where he's hovering around wide receiver 12, 13, 14 as he currently is. I think it's going to be closer to like 19, 20. And the reason for that is he currently is 23rd in targets, 25th in yards. He just happens to have 4 touchdowns. Michael Pittman in his career has had 1 season with more than 4 touchdowns. Now, have we seen in recent history guys explode when they haven't had that, right? We saw that with Terry McLaurin last year with 13. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I'm going to bet a little bit on the fact that Danny Dimes and Michael Pittman Jr. aren't the duo to break out for double-digit touchdowns. That's essentially what I'm betting on this year. And the one thing I kind of want to walk us through is if we just took his volume and yardage the same, and we just say over this next stretch of 5 games, he scores 1 touchdown in 5 games instead of 4 touchdowns in 5 games, right? Flip the touchdowns essentially. He's wide receiver 32. He's essentially what Devonta Smith is. He has 1 more reception and 1 more yard than Devonta Smith does on the year. You're looking at it, and you look at the half PPR points on the screen if you're watching over on YouTube. Without a touchdown, it's 6, 6, 10, 11. Now he has 4 touchdowns, so obviously, it doesn't matter. You're feeling good. I have him on a dynasty team. I'm feeling pretty good about it right now. But I just think moving forward, I'm not going to continue to bank on those touchdowns. And it's not like we're seeing crazy volume coming in that I'm worried about games when those touchdowns aren't coming. So that's what it is. I assume he's going to still produce, but I think he, again, perfect tier up guy, perfect guy to go get, one of these players in the top 10 wide receivers and use Michael Pittman to go do that.
I mean, just look at the upcoming schedule. Arizona, pretty decent matchup this upcoming week, but then you go Chargers, Titans, Pittsburgh, Atlanta, bye week in week 11. You finish out the year, Kansas City, Houston, Jacksonville, Seattle, San Francisco, Jacksonville again, and then Houston.
Yeah.
So I think about this also from the lens of like what I argue for AJ Brown, of just like, is there an opportunity, right, despite some tougher matchups, that like Indianapolis has to throw the ball? Sure, there's always that possibility. But what Michael Pittman Jr. has going for him right now that AJ Brown doesn't is, like you said, is touchdowns. And I'm not exactly sure that we're going to continue averaging nearly a touchdown per game for the rest of the year, and especially with some of these matchups that he has coming up. But it's tough because you're looking at him and you're like, gosh, he's been one of my more, solid contributors so far this year. Why would I want to cut ties? And you said it perfectly. You're trying to tier up with Michael Pittman Jr. You're not trying to get what's fair. You're not trying to go a 2-for-1 when you're getting 2 pieces back for Michael Pittman. No, you're tiering up. So let's do a little name game, right? Who would you target in a tier up situation for Michael Pittman Jr.? I'll start with Courtland Sutton.
I think he's a perfect one to go after.
I would agree with that. Jalen Waddle.
See, Jalen Waddle is not even a tier up. You could probably get Jalen Waddle plus for Pittman. I mean, it depends on the right. It depends on the manager. Like some people are just so in on Waddle, but I would trade them straight up for sure.
So, interesting. You do like Waddle the rest of the year better
I
than
do, yes.
Jr. I don't hate that. How about a guy like, is this too high of a tier up, would you say? Garrett Wilson.
I mean, you'd have to pay a little bit more, but yeah, I would. I don't know. I think you might have to pay too much.
Sure.
Where you giving up, but obviously, yeah. If you could take Pittman to go get Garrett Wilson and give up like a Tony Pollard to a running back needy team, like that's exactly the trade I would make.
So last name here, Devontae Adams.
Yes, I would, because if I'm looking at guys who are going to score touchdowns, I'm going to pick Devontae Adams moving forward, who I think is going to have similar volume because he's attached to Matthew Stafford and a pass first offense, whereas Pittman is Daniel Jones and they have Jonathan Taylor. And if you're picking between Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor, who's going to score touchdowns the rest of the season, it's probably going to be Jonathan Taylor.
Or even Tyler Warren at some point. If
exactly.
we get some red zone packages there, like I would agree. I think for me, you said that like Cortland Sutton is kind of the ideal to kind of tier up. For me, the ideal one is Devontae Adams, and it's for the exact reason that you had.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog, where you can get into the game this season playing Pick'em. It's extremely simple. Just pick higher or lower on 2 or more of your favorite players. For example, I'll pick the higher on Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and Xavier Worthy. If I played $10 and got all 3 of them right, I would win $60 just by watching football. And that's the beauty of Pick'em. You can track your picks and your wins while you enjoy the game. Now, if you're not on Underdog yet, scan the QR code on your screen or use our code FELLAS when you sign up, because new customers will get $50 in bonus funds when you play your first $5 on the app. Plus, Underdog will give you a free pick to use in your first entry. Again, that's code FELLAS over on Underdog. Now let's get you back to the rest of the show.
And we're back with some buy, sell, hold. We promised you about a little bit of debate here. I'm going to be honest. These 4 players, we're going to talk on the back half, Trey McBride, Xavier Worthy, Zay Flowers, T. Higgins. Ty, I have no idea what direction you are feeling with any of those 4. So I'm very interested to hear where you're at, because Trey McBride right now, we're looking at a guy with 25% target share. However, his ADOT is only 6.6, and he's only at 1.62 yards per route run, with only 2 end zone targets all year. So that's a little bit of a negative, but I think it's clearly still the number 1 option in the passing game, even though Marvin Harrison, maybe getting better over the last 2 games. So, Ty, where do you stand with Trey McBride? Is he a buy? Is he a sell? Or are you holding?
If I do not have Trey McBride, I'm going to go send out a feeler offer just to see what the Trey McBride manager is feeling after what is considered a down week for Trey McBride. And I throw that out I use that very, very lightly, because if 6.6 half PPR fantasy points is a down for Trey McBride, is down for a tight end, you still have it pretty good, right? Obviously, it didn't win you your week, but it probably didn't lose you your week either. So, like I said, if I do not have Trey McBride, I'm going to go try and buy, but you can understand why the manager won't necessarily be on a sell, or at least if they come back to you and say, like, I'm not selling Trey McBride anytime soon, you can at least understand why. He's still tight end 2 in usage, right? And when we look at the tight end landscape, there are not many guarantees this year when it comes to tight ends. When we look at the top 5 tight ends in usage this year, it's Jake Ferguson, it's Trey McBride, it's Brock Bowers, it's Hunter Henry, and it's Tyler Warren. Can I give you the next 5 tight ends in usage?
Would love to hear it.
Juwan Johnson,
Ooh,
who is on the downtrend now with Taysom Hill and Foster Moreau back in the mix. Dallas Goedert, 7, who is the definition of he is the new Mark Andrews of just riding touchdowns to relevance. Harold Fannin is 8th, who I'm not going to sit here and say that he got outplayed by David Njoku, but it was kind of telling that David Njoku was the guy that had a game with Dylan Gabriel as quarterback. Kyle Pitts is at 9th. What changes does Atlanta have coming out of the bye? Are we going to get Darnell Mooney more involved if he stays healthy, obviously? Who knows how that goes? And then Jake Tonjes is 10th. and George Kittle is obviously going to come back here in the next couple of weeks. So this is a pretty easy one for me. Trey McBride is one of the very few guarantees in the tight end landscape. And if I can get him for fair value or maybe even a slight discount, it's an easy buy then.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think he's definitely a buy. You just don't get the volume from these guys the way that you're getting it from Trey McBride right now. I understand you're getting it from Jake Ferguson, but we know Jake Ferguson has CeeDee Lamb coming back, and I don't necessarily think that makes Jake Ferguson a sell. That's a different conversation. But we're talking about a guy who is, like you said, I mean, you look at that 9, 7, 8, 11, 7 targets for a tight end, and we're talking about pretty elite wide receiver targets right there.
Seriously, and this is what we got last year too. Like Trey McBride had a touchdown problem last year, and he still finished in the top 3 tight ends. So if that's the concern that people have, that he's not getting any more red zone looks, I don't really care. I really wasn't expecting that to change this year. That would have been an added bonus if it changed.
Yeah, and I mean, it still could moving forward, but at the end of the day, what you know with Trey McBride is you're going to see 8+ targets a game is essentially where you're going to be at. So I would agree. I think he is definitely a buy. The next player, Xavier Worthy. And I know Xavier Worthy managers are, what do we do? Where are we at here? We saw 8 targets, 9 targets last 2 games. Obviously, yardage wasn't necessarily where you wanted it to be. Last game against Jacksonville, 21% target share over the last 2 games, which is 28th. He has 40% of the Chiefs' air yards and 30% team yard share at 2.02 yards per route run, which is great. And if this is where you were, I'd say, hey, go buy Xavier Worthy, no doubt about it. But week 6 is the last week he has without Reshape Rice. So what does that mean for you? Does that make him a sell? Are you buying on that news? Are you holding to wait and see what happens? Where are you at with him?
If I am an Xavier Worthy manager, I'm holding. I'm not trying to capitalize. I'm not trying to sell, because on one hand, I would guarantee, I would bet that 99.9% of people in your league and across the fantasy landscape know that Reshape Rice is coming back. So I don't really think you're going to get exactly what's fair or right value if you were to sell Xavier Worthy. At the same time, on the other hand, I'm holding, because what if Xavier Worthy becomes the Tyquan Thornton in this Chiefs offense? Now that could be asking for a lot, because we know that Xavier Worthy is kind of the quick out and design touch guy in this Kansas City offense. And so that is a bit of a role change for Worthy. But again, I just pose the question, what if he does kind of take the verticality role, or the vertical role that Tyquan Thornton has kind of adopted in this offense? Now, is it possible that Tyquan Thornton kind of stays involved because he maintains that vertical role, that big play downfield role? Totally. That's totally within the realm of possibility. But again, if I'm an Xavier Worthy manager, I'm holding on the chance that we do kind of take over the Tyquan Thornton role, and we keep the design, we keep the quick outs, that we can continue to rack up 6, 7, 8 targets a game. And maybe, again, the design touches get, we find more design touches if we get into the red zone more often.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I think he's a buy. And the reason I think he's a buy is because people are going to panic about Reshape Rice coming back. And honestly, if I'm looking at this offense and going, who do I think is going to struggle the most with Reshape Rice coming back? You brought it up, Ty, in our group chat earlier. This might actually be a Travis Kelce conversation, where you're worried about Kelce, because Rice has shown when he's active, he's Mahomes' safety blanket plus, right? He is doing what Kelce used to do, because Kelce's lost a half step. He's not breaking tackles. He's not making guys miss in space. And Rice is. So for me, the worry is Travis Kelce. And I think I'm going to use the negative that's surrounding Xavier Worthy to go, no, I want to go buy in on Xavier Worthy right now, because I see 8, 9 targets, and I'm going, man, they need that speed on this offense, right? It's not like it's Hollywood Brown, Tyquan Thornton. They have speed, but he's the best talent out of all three of them. And they just need talented players on the field. Like, that's just been evident for Patrick Mahomes over the last 2 years. So I don't think they're all of a sudden going to go, you know what? Rashee Rice is back. He's the only talented player we can use. They're going to go, no, that's how Andy Reid's smart enough to go, how can I use these two in tandem to make this offense better? So, yeah, I'm buying in on Xavier Worthy at this point, using the Rashee Rice is coming back, wheels about to fall off kind of a thing. Making somebody like, because I think people are like, oh, he's a pseudo sell high. But I don't think you're actually selling him high because everybody knows Rice is coming back. So I think you're buying him at fair value, hoping that, hey, where he's at right now is where he continues to go with Rice.
I feel like this can be part one of two in this. It's a Xavier Worthy conversation that like we can come back and talk about him next week after, or I should say 2 weeks from now, after we see Rashee Rice play, and we can say, okay, here's what we know. Here's what things looked like in the first game with Rice. And now we can reassess. But I would agree with you on the premise of just like, hey, if you do not have Xavier Worthy right now, just again go see what the price is on Worthy right now, because I can almost guarantee you that he's going to be about 90 cents on the dollar right now, because people just they know that Rice is coming back. They know it's going to happen, and they know that it's going to impact Worthy in some way.
Definitely. Moving on to our next guy, Zay Flowers. And I'll admit, I've been a downer on Zay Flowers this offseason. But Ty, he's proved me wrong a little bit in this first quarter of the year. 23.6% target share. He has 5+ catches and 70+ yards in 4 of his first 5 games. The issue with Zay Flowers, and this was what I talked about before, is he's only got 1 touchdown. However, the difference between this year and last year is the Ravens defense is giving up 171 points through 5 games. And their 2000 Super Bowl run, they gave up 165 points on the season. And they've given up 170 in 5 games. So it's a little bit different. So Ty, with all that, and you add in Lamar's injury currently, where are you at with Zay Flowers?
I just want to say this. I know we kind of led this whole segment off with like, I think we're going to disagree a bit. We're 2 for 2 on our stances on this one. We're not.
You
looking
were a hold.
here.
I was a buy.
Yeah, I've thrown out the contingencies. You have just been more outright on some of these, and I feel like we're going to go 3 for 3 because I would sell Zay Flowers right now.
Ooh. We're not.
You're holding.
Wow.
Okay. Glad to hear. So here's why I'm selling Zay Flowers. Rams this week in week 6 with Cooper Rush. Obviously, it's going to be tough to sell until you know that Lamar is coming back. I feel like we can pretty much assume that Lamar is going to come back for week 8 because this team is going to be 1-5 after we play the Rams. And then we have a bye week in week 7. So we have 3 weeks of recovery for Lamar Jackson to finally come back. We've talked about this with Derrick Henry. As this Baltimore team and offense gets healthier, and more so maybe the defense than it is the offense. As this Baltimore team gets healthier, I'm expecting this run game to kind of take over the offense and not be so reliant on Lamar in the passing game as they have been so far. Last 3 weeks, obviously we have a game with Cooper Rush in there. But we're talking about 7 catches on 8 targets for 74 yards against Kansas City, 72 yards against Houston. He's still the wide receiver 56 in usage. And if we want to go like real in depth and just look at this last game against Cooper Rush, that 72 yards is kind of a facade because he had a catch of 56 yards. So before that, we had 4 catches for 16 yards. So are people going to be a little scared right now, and that you may not exactly get the full price on Zay Flowers because of what we saw with Lamar earlier this year? Probably. But I think there's just about like an ounce left of like, maybe I can get a more reliable piece than Zay Flowers right now, because I think, again, when everything is equal, everyone is healthy, and everything is clicking here in Baltimore, we know what Zay Flowers' role is in this offense. And it's the occasional kind of like pop-up, like 20-yard play, because we know that Derrick Henry is going to get his. We know that Lamar is going to be Lamar, and we know that Mark Andrews is their preferred red zone guy.
Yeah, so I know I was down on him, and the reason I'm going to say he's a buy right now is because one thing I've noticed throughout this offseason is every time I let off with Zay Flowers, as I said, he's an extremely talented wide receiver. And I watch the Ravens, and I go, he is by far the most talented pass catcher on this offense. And Lamar Jackson has, when healthy, didn't exactly show a lot of signs of slowing down as a passer. And so I understand the smaller passing pie, but I think at this point, Zay Flowers is head and shoulders ahead of DeAndre Hopkins, Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, that this volume, when Lamar does come back, is going to be sticky. That's where I'm at. And I'm also a buy because people are, like you said, panicking a little bit with the fact that Cooper Rush is the quarterback right now. Panicking a little bit with the fact that, hey, it's, hasn't been overly pretty these last 3 weeks, despite 70 plus yards, right? It's been decent, but it hasn't been awesome. And then the fact that I know they're going to get healthier, but I don't trust this Ravens defense at all because they weren't exactly great when they were healthy. So I think they're going to have to put up points. I think they're going to have to throw the ball, and I think that's going to come through Zay Flowers in this offense. So I know I'm reversing, and I know I don't do that very well, right? I stick with my takes a little longer than I probably should, but I'm going to reverse course on Zay Flowers, and I do think that he is a buy currently.
Fascinating. Look, I'm never gonna hold it against people that they change their stance, because things change in the NFL. Obviously, the expectation that we had was that we were going to get more of the same from the past 2 years, and we've gotten slightly different usage this year. So, look, I'm not gonna give you any grief for switching up a take, but I feel like we're contradicting ourselves when we're selling Michael Pittman and we're holding fast on Michael Pittman in other leagues. But that's another conversation for another time. Another time.
Difference is Lamar Jackson versus Daniel Jones. That's all I will say. And then our last guy
and redraft.
Yeah. last guy here, T. Higgins. Wow. Talk about a guy who's probably going to be an enigma this week. What do we do with him? Not a single finish in half PPR formats inside the top 25 so far this year. He has one game over double-digit half PPR points. He's yet to top 3 receptions or 60 yards in a single game. And he now gets a quarterback in Joe Flacco, who had one game out of his 4 with over 200 yards, not a single multi-passing touchdown game. And his yards per attempt were at 5.5. So, Ty, I know I painted that pretty negatively. Does that still make you want to buy?
No, you go first.
Well,
you go
why?
first.
Why?
Oh, I feel like I've gone first all day, so I think it's time for you to go first.
Okay. If you really want, I'm worried that it's a trap. However, I think as of right now, if you have T. Higgins, he's a hold. And I would be throwing out feelers for Higgins because I think Joe Flacco can give them a little more life, right? What we saw from Jake Browning was just abysmal. It was going to be coaching malpractice if they put him back out there. I'm not thinking that Joe Flacco is going to lead this team like he did with the Browns a couple of years ago. He's starting to look older. This offensive line is terrible. However, if he can just be functional, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase are both more than capable of putting up pretty good stats. And I just wanted to pull up one more thing real quick on Joe Flacco. I wanted to read off how many attempts he had per game in his 4 games: 45, 45, 36, 34. So he's a guy that's okay just chucking the ball, right? He's a guy that's okay just throwing it out there. And his wide receivers in Cincinnati are going to be a little bit better than what he was dealing with in Cleveland. So I'm going to say he's a soft buy. I'm not like all in, like you have to go buy him, but I'd throw out some feelers for T. Higgins.
So if I'm able to fence sit on any of the guys this week, this is the one. Because on one hand, you can make the argument that he's a buy because you can ask yourself, will the price ever be this low again? I think that's a fair question to ask. And I think if you think that the price only goes up from here, then he should be a buy. For me, I think he's a sell.
Ooh.
Because I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to get with Joe Flacco as my quarterback. It would be a different story. Like we talked about this. It would be a different story if it was Jameis Winston.
Yes.
It would be a different story if it was even Russell Wilson at quarterback.
Yeah. Be a much better story.
Unlimited. If, again, because we have Joe Flacco at quarterback, sure, the intrigue for touchdowns goes up because we need to be honest about this. T. Higgins has never really been a volume guy over the past like 4 or 5 years, excluding this year. We had talked about T. Higgins about taking a jump up in volume. Last year, it was great. In 12 games, he had 110 targets, so he was on pace to see a jump in targets. We got 10 touchdowns. That's what made up for the volume, the non-volume jump that we got. So, are we expecting him to get a major jump in volume here with Joe Flacco? I don't think it's going to be as big of a jump as people will want it to be. So then part 2 of this question, are the touchdowns going to come back? A little bit. But again, I don't think it'll be to where people want it to be when you go from Jake Browning to Joe Flacco. So because of that, it leads me to think that we're going to continue seeing the inconsistencies with T. Higgins. Now, it has been inconsistent in the past, but when the ceiling with when the inconsistent ceiling is as high as it is with Joe Burrow, it's nowhere near the same with Joe Flacco. So again, because of the inconsistencies, I'm going to see if I can package up T. Higgins right now and just go upgrade to a Michael Pittman Jr. I know we just called him a sell, but at least I know I know what I'm getting with Michael Pittman Jr. at this point. Maybe I can go do a Chris Olave. I would like that a lot because again, I know exactly what I'm getting with Chris Olave. So that's to give you the Spark Notes version of my argument. I'm still not sure exactly what I'm going to get with T. Higgins on a week-to-week basis. And if I need something steady right now, I'm going to go see if I can go find a more reliable piece that again, like I said, a little more consistent. I know what I'm getting week to week instead of T. Higgins.
I hear you, but I'm also looking at the playoff schedule, and from week 12 on, he goes New England, Baltimore, Buffalo, Baltimore, Miami, Arizona.
So points.
And so that
points will be scored.
So that's just part of my take, but I do understand from your perspective of even with that schedule, it's not like you're going to sit there and count on them for 12 points a game because you just have no idea when it's coming. Well, that wraps us up for our trades. We'll look into, I think next week, Ty, we're going to stop teasing it. Next week, we're going to post it on our Instagram. We're going to take your trades. We'll discuss them at the end of this episode. So make sure you are following our Instagram for that. That's the FFL is over there. If you want the rest of our socials, FFLs on Twitter, I'm at Camla FFF. Tyler's at Tyler_Plath. Fantasy Football Fellas for TikTok, Facebook, and this YouTube page, which you should hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications for so you don't miss our starts coming out tomorrow. And if you want our shorts on the YouTube, it's Fantasy Football Fellas Shorts. Well, that wraps it up, and we will hopefully see you tomorrow. Deuces.
Deuces.